In this video, we're going to talk about the naming of clouds, including prefixes and suffixes. We're also going to talk about cloud types and show examples of each type. So first, the prefixes and suffixes. So there are three that designate what texture the cloud is. There's cumulus, or cumu, which says puffy and rounded. There's cirrus, which means thin and feathery, but cirro also means high level as well, so watch out for that. There's also some suffixes, including nimbus, which means rain, and stratus, which really means flat and blanket-like. The altitude can also be told from the prefixes. So their cirro means high level, 16,000 feet or 6,000 kilometers or higher. There's alto, which means mid-level, somewhere between 6 to 20,000 feet or 2 to 6 kilometers. And anything lower than alto just has its standard name and does not need a prefix designating its altitude. So let's take a look at some of the examples now. The first example is cirrus clouds. Those are the long, streamy, you might see them called horse tails or something like that. Most cirrus clouds are going to be very high, above 18,000 feet. And they're mostly made of ice crystals. They're very thin and wispy for that reason. And in fact, if you see plain contrails, they're also technically cirrus clouds as well, depending on their altitude, but most of them are above 18,000 feet to begin with. Other things about cirrus clouds. If you see cirrus clouds coming your way, there's probably a change in the weather because they are the first sign that a warm front is coming through. Now, there are a couple different types of clouds that have cirrus in their name. There's regular cirrus, over here on the left. There's Cirrocumulus, which is high up but also fluffy. And there's Cirrostratus, which is high in altitude but thin and wispy but blanket-like, covers much of the sky. Let's take a look at our next type, Cumulonimbus. So you can see it's got the cumulo, so it's fluffy, but it also has nimbus, meaning rain. And so Cumulonimbus would be a, fluffy rain cloud. And so these ones are the ones that you generally think of when you think of thunderstorms. Now for altitude, they're interesting in the fact that cumulonimbus can go all the way from the ground up to basically the level of the stratosphere for their altitude. So unlike most other clouds, they don't hang around in one specific altitude, not mid or lower or upper levels. They can go at all three. Now, because of the nimbus, they definitely can make rain. Sometimes they don't, but usually they do. Here's another example of cumulonimbus from the ground, and you can see lots of rain coming out of the bottom of part of the cumulonimbus. Not all of it, just part, because other parts are actually bringing in air to replace the air that's brought down by the cumulonimbus. So for a cumulonimbus to continue, it has to bring in fresh heat and fresh moisture in order to power the cumulonimbus. Now here's a couple of cumulonimbus clouds in formation. So at the beginning, it kind of looks like a regular cumulus cloud, very puffy, but you can see it's vertically oriented. In the middle, it's definitely got a vertical oriented. You can see the anvil head and also rain coming out the bottom. And as the cumulonimbus is ending, instead of being vertical, it starts spreading out horizontally, being brought sideways by the winds. Now, Altocumulus has cumulus in its name. You can see light and fluffy again, but instead of being, near the ground, it's now alto. It's in the mid-levels, the 2 to 6 kilometer range. Usually Altocumulus is another sign that a warm front is coming or that it's very warm. So Altocumulus can be a sign that a thunderstorm will happen because, Altocumulus is made by moisture and heat. Now here's another picture of Altocumulus, much thinner than the last picture. And you can see that they come in small patches, or if necessary, they can also come in layers like the last picture. But in this one, definitely small patches of little cumulus puffy clouds. Now regular cumulus, no prefixes or suffixes on this one, just puffy regular clouds. They don't have a long lifespan, so most cumulus clouds last about 5 to 40 minutes. Longer for the bigger ones, shorter for the smaller ones. Now cumulus clouds are the ones you think of when you think, oh, I can see pictures in the clouds. So that's the ones that take interesting shapes. And usually cumulus clouds are associated with fair weather as long as they're not building up vertically like we saw with cumulonimbus. So here's another example of a cumulus cloud. Now let's talk about Strato-cumulus. So Strato-cumulus, flat layers of cumulus clouds over long areas. Usually they're darker than cumulus and can block out more sunlight. They're at the same altitude, so lower levels, below about 6,000 feet. Usually they don't reach the ground, and usually stratocumulus does not make rain by itself. So that's why it's not stratocumulus nimbus. Here's some more stratocumulus clouds. You can see they are puffy, but look at the bottom of them, flat for all of them, and they tend to form larger flat layers, especially over here in the background of this picture and the foreground. Now, we already talked about cirrus clouds. Contrails of airplanes are technically cirrus clouds because how high up they are. Let's talk about stratus clouds. So generally stratus clouds tend to hang around near 6 to 20,000 feet. You also can have altostratus clouds in that range as well at the upper altitudes. For the lower altitudes, we just call them regular stratus. Now, stratus clouds could be rain producing or not. It just depends. So stratus clouds can often produce rain, but it will not be as intense rain as something like, say, a cumulonimbus. Stratus clouds also resemble fog. If they were to reach the ground, you would call it a fog, basically the same thing. So here's an example of stratus clouds. Fog in some areas? Yes, definitely. You can see large flat layers of clouds in this instance. How about NimboStratus? So NimboStratus definitely make rain. They are low levels, so somewhere between 0 to 6,000 feet, up to about 2 kilometers or so. And they're primarily composed of water, not ice, like some higher level stratus clouds could be. And they make rain because it's right there in the name, NimboStratus. And so they're going to be darker than most regular stratus clouds because of that. Here's another example of NimboStratus Clouds. You can see right there, darker. It's also raining in the background of this picture. And for a weather system that makes NimboStratus Clouds, they tend to hang around for long periods of time, up to a couple days of just light rain for NimboStratus. Now here's a picture with all the types of clouds. You can see what they look like in relation to each other and their altitudes. So you can see up here, we've got Cirro, Cirrus. All the Cirro and Cirrus clouds will generally be high altitude, whereas the alto levels will be mid-latitude, or mid-altitude, I should say. And down at the bottom, we have the regular cumulus, the regular stratus, and then the mix of the two, Strato-cumulus. Like I said earlier, cumulonimbus takes up all the altitude.